Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Are people coming back for the break or staying a little bit over there? Well, let's start anyhow. First of all, thank you for your invitation. I mean, I've already learned a lot this morning. It's a very insightful conference, and I'm sure there are a lot of interesting professionals to connect with, so don't hesitate to reach out during the lunch break. I'll be around. I will first by telling you a few things about me. So my name is Emmanuel Mounier, as you can see here, and I'm coming with two different hats. Secretary General of EU Travel Tech and Secretary General of Global Travel Tech. It is with this second hat that I have been invited today, but let me first say a few words about this first hat, EU Travel Tech. We are a European trade body, a European trade association based in Brussels, and we represent the interests of the travel tech industry, so all of you, towards the European institutions. Among our members, I think, well, let's maybe do a quick poll. Who's working for one of those companies in the room? Yeah, so I see quite a few, so it's more like a family meeting today. It's good, it will make it much easier. And so our association, representing your companies, is active on a broad range of topics in Brussels. The rules applicable to platforms, the rules applicable to travel agents, the rules applicable to package agent organizers, the application of competition law to our sector, and I'll tell you more about some of those policy issues very soon. So we really try to stand out for you in the European policy discussions, and this is so the first job I am holding, that I've been holding for 6 years now, and the one I will be happy to talk about with you if you want to connect during the lunch break. Just as a side note, before doing this job, I was neither in travel nor in tech, so I'm not long-time professional like you are. I was an official in the French administration, so quite a different world. So I have a lot to learn from you, and I'll be happy to learn as much as I can. But now, let me tell you about the association I will represent this morning, Global Travel Tech. So why do we have Global Travel Tech? What is it? Well, actually, it is there to fill a gap. In the travel tech industry, you have heavyweight players, Booking.com, Amadeus, Expedia Group. I'm sure I'm missing many of them, but what they have in common is having a global footprint, playing a critical role in the travel and tourism ecosystem. They are global almost by essence, as is travel. And they are already represented by regional associations. I was just referring to EU Travel Tech in the EU, but you also have ATIA in the APAC region, or the Travel Tech Association in the US. And maybe some of you are part of the activities of those associations. But if you have those regional associations, you don't have any global associations, like you have for some other part of the ecosystem. Think IATA for aviation, for example. So 6 of those global players have decided to join forces and to launch Global Travel Tech to fill this gap. And they have made me the honor of entrusting me to lead it. So Global Travel Tech will be the voice of the travel tech industry on the global stage, whenever there is a need to engage with global policymakers or other industry stakeholders. So we were also at ITB last March, because this is where we actually launch our association. So it's really a newborn baby, one to treat with a lot of care, still fragile, still trying to find its place. And so in Berlin, we had the chance of presenting a bit what we'll be standing out for as an association, with a panel session on sustainability, but also with a launch event where we describe a bit our industry and how it was positively contributing to the travel and tourism ecosystem. Maybe some of you actually were in the room at ITB. So now we're standing ready to work with all of you. And I will try to detail a bit more what are the issues we will be working on as a Global Travel Tech. I will try to show you to what extent they could be relevant to what you are doing, and therefore why you should care about the work of these associations and why you should engage with us in the coming weeks and months. You have here some examples of the other global bodies we'll try to engage with in the future. I was mentioning IATA, but you can think of OECD or UNWTO, UN Tourism now, but I'll give you more examples in the coming slides. So our first objective will clearly to promote what we see as the positive role of indirect distribution channels in the overall travel and tourism ecosystem. Because we believe that they contribute to the prosperity of our sector, mindless of the difficult discussions that you could sometimes have with suppliers, like hoteliers. If we are all together in this room today, it shows that there is a possibility to have a good, constructive dialogue. And this is clearly an objective for this association. Especially because in global travel tech, you have OTAs, you have metas, you have GDSs, you may have TMCs in the future. So they all play a different role in the travel and tourism distribution chain. An equally important one, but a different one. But as global travel tech, we really represent the whole travel distribution chain. And that puts us in a very privileged role to contribute to discussions on the future of our industry. As an industry, travel distribution, travel tech and distribution, we see for ourselves a mission. We connect suppliers and travelers. We enable the choice of consumers on one side, and we provide them with a trusted environment. And on the other side, we enable fair competition between all suppliers, giving all of them, big or small, a chance to compete on merits. So we really will endeavor, as the trade associations, to engage with all industry stakeholders, but also with policymakers, to represent this industry and showcase its positive contribution. Now let me try to be a bit more precise of what it means when you look at specific policy issues, because yes, I will talk about policy, a bit far away from what you're doing on a daily basis, but still having an important impact on your activities. Looking at sustainability, I mean, Florence was describing this morning how sustainability plays a more and more important role in the choice of travelers. It is because, well, our economies, our societies are going through an unavoidable green transition. And travel and tourism sector, obviously, is not immune to it. We need to find ways to provide our services while ensuring they are sustainable for our planet. And this is a shared challenge for all economic sectors. So this means we need to develop more sustainable travel options, more sustainable accommodation services. And I know all your companies are deeply engaged in this process. So where does travel tech, indirect distribution channel, stand in this equation? Well, we've seen this morning there is already a strong green demand coming from leisure travelers, but also from corporate travelers, as companies want to mitigate their environmental footprint in line with their ESG commitments. And so that's a challenge you are facing. So the question is how to connect this green demand and this national green supply you are all developing. How to ensure that they meet each other. Well, we really see that as our mission. And for us, we have a critical role in channeling the green demand toward the green offers. We want to unlock this additional sustainable demand. So where policy comes into play? Well, if you want this match between green demand and green offer, you need a nexus point, and this nexus point is quite often green labels. Those green labels that you are showcasing on your distribution platforms. But today you have this proliferation of green labels because everybody wants to showcase its green efforts, and that's very good. But as a result, because of this proliferation, and because greenwashing is never far away these days, we see governments trying to regulate more and more how these labels are being awarded, how these labels are being defined. And more we are seeing some governments adopting a very restrictive approach on how those labels are awarded, telling the accommodation industry, telling the transport industry, this is how sustainable you should be to get this label. Well, it does raise some significant issues for our sector. Clearly, if the label is too restrictive and therefore awarded to only a limited number of providers, then it means that a whole range of sustainability efforts are not showcased and not rewarded. And why getting greener if you don't get any reward for it from your consumers? Clearly, the best incentive to get greener is to get additional business from those efforts. And for that, you need good standards, allowing you to showcase your efforts. You need standards which are trusted by your customers, which are reliable, which are accessible, with the possibility for a broad range of suppliers to get access to them. So for us, this standardization efforts, which needs to be made by your industry, it shall be a shared industry effort. Basically, what will happen in the coming years is that either slot labor will be defined with us or imposed on us. And that's what Global Travel Tech will want to get committed to and to engage with all of you. Work with all industry stakeholders, hoteliers, carriers, distribution channels, and try to define common standards. There is a lot of efforts which are already being made by certification bodies, etc. But what matters here is cooperation, and we want to be part of this conversation. So you could tell me why travel tech, indirect distribution channels should tell hotels how sustainable they are. Well, we believe we have a say into this conversation because we know our customers very well. We know what are their expectations. We know what they can trust and what they cannot trust. So we really are stakeholders in this conversation, and this is what we'll intend to do in the coming years. Moving on to another policy topic which could be very relevant for your activities. As you know, it is quite recent, the rise of internet. If you look at the situation 2 decades, 3 decades ago, it was a totally different landscape. With the rise of internet, you are also seeing the rise of behemoths, digital behemoths, big tech, GAFAM, name it the way you want. They have acquired a market power which has raised some competition challenge like never seen before in competition history. This morning, Florence was talking about general search as the entry point for many consumers. By general search, what you mean is Google. Let's be clear, as they are over-dominant. And what we have seen over the last decade is Google leveraging on this dominance on market power to develop new travel products, Google Hotels, Google Flights, Google Experiences, and so on. Those products, travel products, have more and more developed some market relevance over the year. This practice of leveraging on your dominant position in an upstream market to get into a downstream market is called self-preferencing. And we clearly see it as an anti-competitive practice. And it has been acknowledged as such now by a number of competition authorities. As it is the case quite often, the European Union has been leading the pack and has adopted what is called the Digital Markets Act. And under this act, under this legislation, self-preferencing is banned for gatekeepers, so companies so big that they fulfill certain criteria, including for Google. This is what we call a best practice because it addresses a very challenging issue in our travel and tourism ecosystem. And we call for this best practice to be broadly disseminated. And as you see, what we call the Brussels effect, meaning the replication of some EU legislation in other jurisdictions, is clearly now broadly into play. You have here a list of all the countries where DMA-like legislation have been adopted or are being considered. And you're looking at jurisdiction from all continents, from all sizes. So this is a policy discussion which is taking place at global level and to which we want to be part of. So this is another area where Global Travel Tech will be active. Let me move to another tech legislation area, regulation of platforms. And by platforms, I mean all platforms. With the rise of internet, platform economy, and so on, a number of new issues have developed. The risk of disinformation, the dissemination of hate speech, political advertising, but also on some product marketplaces, the sale of dangerous products or unlawful services. And to address those new challenges, a number of jurisdictions have been adopting new legislation. There again, we have the EU starting the flow with what is called the Digital Services Act. But as you see on this map, it's far from being limited to the European Union. Across continents, you have similar legislation being adopted. Well, it's fully legitimate, and we are not challenging that. But we believe that travel platforms are a bit different than all those platforms raising those issues. I mean, you have no political content on our platforms. You don't have any dangerous services. You cannot buy an inflammable toy on Expedia or Booking. So why should we be regulated the same way? We believe that since we come with different services, we should have a differentiated treatment. And there again, we will endeavor at taking part of those policy conversations taking place at national but also global level to advocate for specific treatment for travel platforms. A last policy topic, global taxation. Another area where rise of internet has raised new issues. Well, a number of governments across the globe have been facing with a taxation challenge. You had those platforms being very active in their countries, raising significant income, but not being located in their countries, with no way to tie their activity and therefore taxation, to tie their benefit and therefore taxation to their territory. Well, that's the whole debate about Amazon and Luxembourg, Apple and Ireland. So a number of countries have decided to develop some new taxation schemes, digital services tax. And what those schemes have in common is that they tax income, not benefits. So basically, it's about which income has been generated and not what benefit as an intermediary you have extracted from this transaction. So it makes sense from a taxation efficiency standpoint, but it raises a major issue. Well, if a transaction is cross-border, and if you're taxed in both countries, then you're double taxed, which first of all, in taxation is a principle you're not supposed well, avoiding double taxation is a core principle. And secondly, well, the business impact is just major. If you think that if you sell a hotel room in Turkey to a French customer, well, you tax in Turkey 3% of your income, and in France 3% of your income. Well, you see the impact it has on your balance sheet. So you cannot have those DSTs without international coordination. And so this is what the OECD has tried to do over the last years, trying to develop an overall taxation scheme at global level to ensure coordination. And as part of this effort, it has been clearly acknowledged by the negotiator at the OECD that the travel platforms were actually too small fish to be concerned by this phenomenon. And so if you look at the OECD framework which is being considered, you don't have any travel platforms. But it is not adopted yet. And the question is whether it will be ever adopted, simply because to have it adopted, you need for the US Congress to ratify the treaty which will be the outcome of this negotiation. And well, I guess there are enough Americans in this room to know how challenging it can be to get anything approved by the US Congress. And so if tomorrow there is no OECD framework, then there will be a need to ensure that all those existing DST schemes take into account the double taxation risk, which is very current today. You have a number of travel transactions which are impacted by those DSTs. So we'll be calling for adequate treatment of the double taxation risk. It's also already existing in some of those schemes. If you look at Spain, for example, you have some specific provisions. So there again, it's about dissemination of good practices. And so that's a topic where Global Travel Tech will be active. So as you have seen, policy does impact your business. And when you talk about policy, well, each of your company is just one stakeholder among many others. When all your companies are within one trade associations, you're already a more powerful stakeholder. And when the whole industry, let's say the travel and tourism industry, speaks with one voice in a coordinated approach, then you can tell the policymakers that their approach is wrong or right. And this is why we believe at Global Travel Tech that cooperation between all tourism and travel stakeholders, for instance in this room, hoteliers and distributors, is critical. And this is clearly our objective, our goal, to be this communication hub between all categories of stakeholders. So now we are out there and we are standing ready to work with all of you. So we're looking forward to speaking with all of you. And thanks a lot once again for your invitation and for your attention.